Annette is quite possibly the most divisive film of 2021. And I say this as someone who has been sitting on this film for the last 2 weeks, trying to make sense of what I had just seen and how I felt about it. My impressions have been fluctuating over the last 2 weeks. I've been thinking about Adam Driver's performance. I've been thinking about Marion Cotillard's performance. I've been thinking about that puppet, that goddamn puppet, that has just been so specific and unique. And I've also been thinking about the Sparks brothers and what they really did for this film, particularly because they went and wrote the screenplay and they did the soundtrack for it. They won the soundtrack award at the Cannes Film Festival this year as well. And I've also been thinking about Leox Carax, and I believe I'm pronouncing that name correctly. It might be Leo Carax. But he also is such a unique film director, film auteur. And I say auteur because he's really like the David Lynch of French cinema. The guy, he looks like Billy Bob Thornton's long lost brother. So he is just such a unique character, especially considering he hasn't had a film released since Holy Motors in 2012. So I was really eager to see this, considering the reputation of Holy Motors and its sort of place in film discourse, particularly with how convoluted it was over the last decade of cinema. So coming into Annette, I didn't know what to expect. I kept an open mind. And I think that's what you really need to do with this film because it has a lot going for it. To start us off, I guess to break down what this film's actually about. It really is the story of two performers. One a comedian, one a soprano. Henry is played by Adam Driver, Ann is played by Marion Cotillard, and the film is a commentary of sorts on stardom and pretty much the effects of stardom and how celebrities sort of maintain this facade in the public eye and what sort of happens behind closed doors. It isn't until the birth of their daughter Annette that that whole facade and that whole image that the two characters have been maintaining is really sort of stripped and broken down. We start to see them for who they really are. They start to see each other for who they really are, and the performance itself changes. And I think that's a really interesting thing, especially coming from the lens of what stardom actually is, what it looks like. It is really a whole masquerade, a show. You're putting on a performance for other people. And Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard, they have such incredible energy and such an incredible dynamic, particularly the juxtaposition between the two. You have Adam Driver, who's this massive brute, who's an incredible actor, obviously in Logan Lucky, in The Last Jedi, in Patterson, Marriage Story, countless other films. And you've also got Marion Cotillard, who's this enigmatic sort of French presence. She's really unique as well. And they're both really soft-spoken, which is also really interesting. So seeing them bounce off each other was an absolute delight, particularly alongside the music, which actually heightened all of the scenes that they were in together. Like, for instance, the song We Love Each Other So Much. For those characters, they're constantly repeating that phrase over and over again throughout the film, and they're almost trying to convince each other of it as well, that they both do in fact love each other so much, which they probably do to an extent. But Annette's birth almost forces them to start confronting their actual emotions, their actual feelings towards one another, as now they have a third person within that relationship. It's no longer a two-way street. But coming back to the Sparks brothers, who have had an absolutely incredible year, especially following that Edgar Wright documentary on them, the Sparks brothers. Yeah, they've come here and they've essentially written up such a unique script. They've wanted to work with the likes of Stanley Kubrick in the past, and that never came to fruition. And now they've got the opportunity to work with Leo Carax. He's ended up bringing their vision to light, and they really do introduce such a unique soundtrack in this. So it's no surprise that they won the Cannes Film Festival award for best soundtrack, because the music is half the film. Like, when I think back to that Jacques Demy film, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, that whole film is pretty much the characters singing the dialogue. And we get that here as well. So a lot of our understanding of the events of the narrative come through how Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard bring the dialogue to life lyrically through the way that they sing. Obviously, I'm not a singer myself, so some people might be able to appreciate that performance from a different perspective, from a musical perspective, but I still think that it is literally half the film. That's how we make sense of the world that they're in a similar way to like A Star Is Born. Like, the music really underscores how the characters feel, what they're going through, what emotions they're going through. And really, I view this film as a sort of mix between, like, for instance, A Star Is Born and something like Beauty and the Beast. Adam Driver, he's this big, again, physical presence, really sort of masculine presence, yet a really soft-spoken voice as well comes from him. And in Beauty and the Beast, it's a similar sort of thing. In A Star Is Born, it's a similar sort of thing. Like, you have these big, rugged male characters, right? And then they complement that sort of muse, I guess, in some sense, that is the female lead. Now, I think the biggest talking point of the film is going to be the fact that Annette is a puppet. There's evident correlations between Annette and Pinocchio. You know, they're both puppets, but they're both children as well, and no one sees them for who they really are. And it isn't until the closing sequence of Annette that Henry realizes he can't just be pulling the strings for her, no pun intended, because she is her own person as well, and she makes that apparent to him. You know, he finally begins to see her in a new light. He finally sees her as the person that she is, as opposed to just the person that he wants her to be, or the idealized version that he has of her. And really, that's the crux of the film. That's what it's about at its simplest. Obviously, there are a lot more elements in there that are a bit more artistic and a bit more experimental in the way that they go about exploring some of these ideas. Because Leox Carax and the Sparks brothers, they're not your average filmmakers and they're not your average musicians, because their work is so polarizing, which is what I think brings it back to that idea of why this film is so divisive. It really is either someone's cup of tea, someone's absolutely going to love this, or someone's absolutely going to loathe this. And that's fine. Everyone's going to have their opinions on this film. So I hope that I provided some sort of background and some sort of insight into what this film is about and sort of my takeaway from it. So I'm going to give this film 7 Wilhelms out of 10. If you have any sort of thoughts, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing what everyone thinks of this film.